Supernatural comedy, So Haunt Me, Monday at 8 on BBC One.
In half an hour, we'll have the full details of a major development in the bid by Rosyth to win the vital Trident contract. Also, should the police have the right to strike? A new survey says yes. And why the homeless are on the streets of Scotland selling magazines. All the news, including Rosyth, at 6:30.
This is BBC Scotland on One. Now the 6 o'clock news with Peter Sissons and Anna Ford.
Good evening. The minister at the centre of the Asil Nadir affair insists he won't resign. Michael Mates says, "I have done nothing wrong." John Major dismisses as total fantasy allegations that the Saudis contributed millions to Tory funds. But Labour's deputy leader condemns the atmosphere of sleaze and the odour of corruption around the government. Rosyth Dockyard cuts 70 million off its bid for the Trident contract to undercut its rival Devonport. And Jeremy Bates goes out in the first round at Wimbledon. The government minister at the centre of the Asil Nadir affair, Michael Mates, has rejected calls for his resignation. The Northern Ireland minister is the most senior Conservative to have been linked to Mr Nadir, who jumped bail and fled to Cyprus. Amid further allegations today about donations to the Tory party, John Major described as fantasy a newspaper claim that sources in Saudi Arabia had given £7 million in cash to the party shortly before the last election. This afternoon, in a highly charged debate in the Commons, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, Margaret Beckett, said there was an atmosphere of sleaze surrounding the government. The Employment Secretary, David Hunt, said her remarks were riddled with rumour and innuendo.
The swirl of allegations about Tory party funding seems to be unending. The latest, to be batted away by the Conservative Party chairman, concerns claims that the Saudis poured in millions of pounds to central office in the run-up to the election.
This party does not accept money from foreign governments, and as far as I know, the story is entire rubbish.
This morning's Guardian claimed that a cabinet minister had seen leading Saudis closely linked to the Saudi government and royal family and secured £7 million for the Tory election war chest. John Major, who's been in Copenhagen for the European summit, has clearly been irritated by the relentless stream of questions on how his party keeps its books.
If you have evidence of the sort that you printed this morning in The Guardian, bring it to me and show it to me. I am assured that your story this morning was total and utter fantasy. If you think it wasn't, until you're sure, bring the evidence to me and see. I make that offer to you. You bring the evidence to me, I'll examine it.
And the Saudi embassy in London issued a statement just in advance of this afternoon's debate, vehemently denying the report. In the Commons, this was seized on by the Tory party chairman.
The Honourable Lady will accept, then, will she, that the allegations made in The Guardian this morning are totally untrue.
The reason that these allegations are made goes to the heart of this debate. The Conservative Party will not tell the people of this country where they got the money for that.
And Mrs Beckett concluded her attack.
This is a shabby government, a deceitful government, a government unworthy of the trust the British people placed in them last year.
This had been a speech riddled with rumour, innuendo and smear, charged the Tories, and the Employment Secretary argued that Labour's motivation was to secure state funding of political parties, and he denied vigorously the opposition charge that honours could be bought.
If the party opposite wish to get into the sewer of politics, they should hardly complain when they find they're up to their neck in it.
And he called on Labour to reveal how much Robert Maxwell had given them. This prompted one opposition backbencher to offer a deal.
How much did Asil Nadir give, precisely? How much did Mr Latsis give? How much did Mr Butler give? How much did Mr Uren give? And how much did Mr Karshin give? Tell us exactly how much they all gave, and we'll do a deal. If they pay all that money back to those people, we'll club together and we'll pay the money back to Robert Maxwell.
This has been a debate that's generated more heat than light. Labour said the Tories didn't answer their questions. The Conservatives said they had nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of. This has also been the position taken by the Northern Ireland Minister, Michael Mates. He said he's going to stand his ground.
Did you ever consider resigning, Minister?
No. Why should I resign? I have done nothing wrong, and I have the confidence of the Secretary of State and of the Prime Minister.
But Mr Mates must reflect uneasily that others who've been here before have eventually seen the ground disappear from under them. And in the Commons, the question that's being asked is, will Mr Mates' defiance stand the test of time? John Sopel, BBC News, Westminster.
Today, Azil Nadir repeated his claim that he would be disclosing new information about his links with the Conservative Party. He says he will publish tape recordings of telephone calls he had with senior figures within the party several years ago.
Mr Nadir's home at Lepta is under siege. His presidential-style bodyguard is with him 24 hours a day, and photographers and reporters are perched on a nearby wall, ready to record his much-promised revelations. Mr Nadir emerged from his front door for the first time for 2 days, but he had little to say. He's expected to provide more details at the end of the week.
But it's up to me to decide. I waited 3 years. Do you have anything to say to the British Parliament, which is debating your case? No comments at all.
So, do you plan to stay here now for the foreseeable future, or are you going to move off somewhere else?
No comments.
But just on this question of...
I think just try not be in the sun.
Mr Nadir is now in discussion with his public relations men over what information he should make public. Mr Nadir is determined to prove his allegation that an official order had gone out to get him, and that the investigation into his affairs was carried out illegally. He insists that even if he had stood trial, the case against him would have been dropped. Michael Macmillan, BBC News, Kyrenia, Northern Cyprus.
The Rosyth Naval Dockyard in Fife is understood to have submitted a new bid, £70 million lower, to try to secure the contract to refit the Trident submarine fleet. There are fears that Rosyth may close if the contract goes to the yard's main rival, the Devonport Dockyard in Plymouth. Today, the Defence Secretary Malcolm Rifkin said a decision would be announced in the near future.
For the last 6 months, Rosyth has been involved in a tense Dutch auction for the Trident contract, desperately seeking ways of undercutting rival bids from the Devonport yard in Plymouth. The Scottish yard has acknowledged expertise in submarine refit work, but increasingly Whitehall sources were suggesting Devonport was in the lead, so the new tender is being seen as an 11th hour bid to influence the government in advance of a crucial subcommittee meeting tomorrow.
The two companies concerned, one in Plymouth and one in Rosyth, have over the last 6 months sent several refinements of their proposals, which inevitably have required time to consider them. Ministers are now considering the conclusions that should be reached, and I would hope that an announcement can be made in the near future.
Rosyth management wouldn't comment this afternoon, and it's not clear, according to the MOD, whether the new bid can even be considered at such short notice. The details of the rival bids remain commercially confidential, but the new Rosyth offer undercuts its previous tender by £70 million. To do so, it's emphasised the use of existing emergency dry dock facilities for the Trident submarines instead of building new ones. The new offer comes as families of Rosyth workers travel to London to lobby for the yard. Despite government assurances, both Devonport and Rosyth say that whichever loses the Trident contract faces a bleak future. Thousands of jobs in the surrounding communities depend on their continued viability. Andrew Castle, BBC News.
Management at the Devonport Dockyard have reacted sceptically to Rosyth's new bid. They describe it as a final desperate attempt to delay the inevitable.
I think the tactics are typical of this management up there. They're using tactics now, putting in proposals at the last minute. We understand from cabinet level sources that they're extremely irritated by this last minute event, which has all the signs of derailing a very sensitive and long-running decision process.
The President of the Board of Trade, Michael Heseltine, will have to stay in hospital in Venice for another few days. British Embassy officials said he was cheerful and had been visited by his wife. She said she didn't want to talk about her husband's political future. She said she was more